Okay, let's do a quick overview of life in the South prior to the Civil War. In the South prior to the Civil War, the number one industry or way to make money was by farming, obviously, and of farming, cotton was going to be the most profitable as the growth of the textile industry was continuing to grow. But the problem was you had to get these seeds out of the cotton, and that was very time-consuming. Eli Whitney solves this problem with the cotton gin, very simple machine that pulls the seeds out of the cotton. As a result, cotton becomes very, very profitable, and slavery and plantations grow in the South. Life lesson for this, Eli Whitney's cotton gin: beware of unintended consequences in life. Eli Whitney didn't intend to make slavery grow, I don't think, by making the cotton gin. He's just trying to solve a problem with seeds, pulling the seeds out of the cotton. But as a result of the cotton gin, slavery did grow, and there was much more suffering in America. So sometimes our best plans have unintended consequences. How can we avoid this? By looking through all aspects of our problems clearly and looking at things through multiple points of view. You cannot prevent all unintended consequences, but through careful planning and good analysis, thoughtful analysis, you can prevent many unintended consequences. Part of the country where cotton was grown is called the Cotton Belt, and it really extended throughout the Deep South. You need a warm, wet climate with fertile soil to grow cotton. So really the cotton was grown right in this region of the South for the most part, mainly the dark green states. The cotton boom was when people got rich and became millionaires off of cotton. The factories in the North wanted cotton for textiles, and planters in the Cotton Belt made millions, and by 1840 the U.S. was making half the world's cotton. At the same time, millions of slaves were suffering producing this cotton. Life lesson from this, growth. The U.S. economy was growing, and cotton was improving the U.S. economy, but one of the big downfalls of the South is they didn't diversify their economy. They didn't continue to grow. They just accepted, growth is key. The Southern economy didn't grow and expand. It didn't become more efficient. It didn't start to produce more. And as a result, when the Civil War came around, and after that, because it was not diversified, the people in the South became poor, and the South struggled for a long time. It's very important that we as people continue to grow throughout our lives, continue to improve and expand. And as we do this individually, our country will continue to grow as well. Very important life lesson. If you want to have more in your life, you have to continue to be better. You have to continue to learn, grow, and improve. Slavery in the South was not everywhere, but there was not slavery really everywhere. Everyone did not own slaves. The majority of people were too poor to own slaves. Now, most people accepted slavery, but it was really only the rich planters that were really profiting off of slavery. So that's an important thing to remember. Most people were so poor, they're called yeoman farmers, that they were just farming for survival themselves, living in one-room cabins and trying to grow enough food to survive the winter and the non-growing season. Life lesson: ISM'S. Southern society was accepting of both racism and sexism. It really ended up hurting their society overall, because when you have discrimination, when you have racism, when you have sexism, when you have ageism, when you have any type of ism where people are being hated and discriminated against, it's going to hurt your society overall, because you're not getting the ideas from all those people. So as we value all people in society, we don't discriminate against any of them, we're going to get everyone's point of view, and everyone is going to be able to contribute to society. When you look at Southern society, more than half the people were not really contributing much of anything. Their ideas were not accepted. All women were not contributing. All minority groups were not really contributing or being allowed to contribute. So they were really limiting the production, efficiency, and ideas of their society. And as we move forward in history, it's very important that as Americans we accept all people and let all people have the best opportunity to contribute to our country, because that's what's going to make our country grow and be successful. Let's talk about the slave system briefly. Control the slaves. Well, there's a lot of ways they had control, and there's a lot of ways they used slaves do work. The way the slaves did work was not very efficient. It was called the gang labor system. Everyone does the same task at the same time. So if all the slaves are picking cotton, they're going to all pick it as a group. They'd work sun up to sundown, little or no breaks, very miserable, but not very efficient either. So there probably were much more efficient ways that the plantations could have produced cotton than the gang labor system. Controlling the slaves was very important for the plantation owners. They did harsh and cruel punishments, incredibly brutal whippings, putting slaves in the stocks. They had a thing called the hot box, where they pretty much baked the slave in the ground in the sun without much food or water. But the number one rule was no education. Slaves were not allowed to be educated. Why? Because an educated slave will want freedom, will be able to make plans for freedom, will be able to communicate with others, will be able to have a life outside the plantation. So the slave codes forbid all slaves from having an education, learning to read and write, and prevent them from gathering in one place or another. So it's very, very important that you remember, anytime someone is trying to prevent you from educating yourself or from gathering to share ideas, that should be a warning sign that they might be preventing you from having the freedom that you deserve. Life lesson. It's hard to imagine that humans would do some of the horrible things to other humans that we have seen in this, in the slave system. The horrible beatings, take away freedoms, the horrible punishments, all the horrible, horrible, immoral things. And that this happened in the United States of America, which is, in my opinion, the best country in the world. How is this possible, you might ask? Well, it didn't happen all at once. It happened a little bit at a time. So a life lesson we should learn is you should not accept any evil immorality into your life. A small little bit can grow. Once you've done something that you know is wrong, it's going to be easier to do it again. An armed robber doesn't probably usually start by robbing a bank with machine guns or violence. It might start with shoplifting, and then that becomes acceptable. Then you do a little bit more, and then you do a little bit more. Hitler, when he was doing his horrible persecution of the Jews, he started out by separating them into ghettos. When people accepted that, he turned them into work camps and stole all their property. When people accepted that, he started the death camps. So it's a little bit at a time. Evil creeps up on us a little bit at a time. We need to stop evil and immorality in our own lives when it's small so it doesn't grow. Now you see the slaves dancing. How did they get through this? They relied on their family. They sang spirituals. They had folk tales. They stuck together. That's how they survived. There were some slave rebellions. Most famous is Nat Turner's rebellion. That's him getting captured right here. His rebellion was from what he thought was inspiration from God. Him and his followers did kill 60 slave owners, but they were all eventually caught and slaughtered and tortured to be made an example of. All slave rebellions in the United States ended up failing. Slaves have contributed a lot to our society and to our country overall. In the beginning, when African Americans were slaves in the South, their labor built the South economy, built our country up. Throughout time, the African American descendants of slaves have contributed so much to our country. They have given us music, culture, thinking, food, and the list goes on and on and on. They've added to the diversity of our great country. And one of the reasons why the United States is so great is because it's so diverse. We have so many different types of people. The list goes on of all the great leaders, thinkers, writers, entertainers, athletes, poets, scientists, astronauts that have contributed to the society from African American descent. So it's a great thing for our country that we have African Americans in our country, that we have people from that heritage in our country. But it's a horrible, horrible thing of how they got here and what they had to endure during the slave times and the times following that of discrimination and racism. But our country has benefited from that overall over time because of the contributions of these people and their descendants. So it's a terrible thing in our country's history, but our country is probably stronger because of it. Life lesson here. We as a country and as individuals want to accept all types of people. When you discount other people because of whatever, the way they look, how old they are, where they're from, you're just limiting yourself. We want to treat all people with dignity and respect, and that dignity and respect will circle around and come back to us when we give that out to people. So be open to all people. Be open to all the ideas. You don't have to accept or like everyone's ideas, but you should listen and learn from them and then come up with your own ideas and your own thoughts of how the world works. But the number one thing you can be here is just treat all people, no matter where they're from, who they are, with dignity and respect. All people deserve that.